Frank Gaffney was President Reagan's Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. Also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Forces and Arms Control Policy. Frank, appreciate you being here. I'm sure you saw what's going on in that Trump White House in that meeting. Can we just dive into the security guarantee part? Because that's the sticky situation that seems to be emerging right now. What do you make of it?
Well, it's sticky all the way around, as best I can tell. On the one hand, I'm incredulous that Vladimir Putin will actually accept it. I'm also somewhat surprised that President Trump apparently has in some form or another. And, whether it's enough to persuade the Ukrainians to relinquish territory that they've lost, to be frank, but nonetheless seek to recover, remains very much to be seen. So it is what the Brits would call, I think, a sticky wicket in the cricket game.
Frank, it seems that basically this has boiled down to Russia's going to demand territory, Ukraine's going to demand security guarantees. I mean, that seems to be the primary goal of each side at this point. How does this resolve itself? Is there any parallel in the Cold War? The analogy we've been using is Korea. You have a demilitarized zone. It's been a tenuous peace, but it now has lasted for 75 some odd years-ish. Is there any precedent there? How would you solve this situation if you were given the ability to act as mediator?
Well, I would do one thing that, as far as I can tell, is not on the table or even being discussed, and that is I would hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for the fix that we're in at the moment. I believe that Xi Jinping specifically greenlighted the invasion of Ukraine, and in so doing has been ever since the enabler of this war. I think they did it for selfish reasons. I believe that it is to distract the United States and the Europeans, to tie us down, to bleed us in terms of military equipment and financial means. And that all serves the purpose of China for its own agenda out in the Pacific. So I would start by saying those guys have to be held accountable for what's being done here. And without that, I honestly am not sure that the Russians will agree to anything. I think as long as the Chinese believe, as they've indicated, that this war should continue, the much junior partner in this so-called no limits partnership, namely Vladimir Putin, is probably going to be heeding his bosses in Beijing. So it's a challenge that is not currently being addressed, as I said, and I think that until it does, it's not clear to me that any of these negotiations amount to much.
So we're still hoping for breakthroughs here, Frank, and we're going to get more details about where the Ukrainian side comes down on this. It seems like there's a willingness for Zelensky to sit down with Putin, which is certainly a necessary precondition for the trilateral discussion, if not trilateral agreement, to come out of this. What, though, do you think, what can Trump do to pressure the Russians to actually be willing to end this thing? Because that's the one thing that's getting a lot of attention right now as this is going on, as these discussions are happening, and Trump was saying it in the Oval Office. The Russians are escalating their offensive. The Russians are trying to run up more casualties on the Ukrainian side, as we're supposed to see conversations about peace. So do you think all the economic levers have been pulled? I mean, how can Trump get through to Putin that he won't just continue to get more if he keeps fighting?
Well, again, Trump has placed secondary sanctions on India for buying Russian oil at discounted prices. The Chinese are also doing that. And I think if Trump wants to bring real pressure to bear on Putin, put those secondary sanctions on China. And I think you'll see that there's probably a willingness to get to an agreement that doesn't exist at the moment. That's what I would do.
How do you preserve? Okay, let's pretend that Ukraine, because this is where I do think Zelensky has maybe the most important argument. let's say that he says, okay, we're going to give you some of the territory that you have invaded that we don't think you deserve, but you took this land and we're going to draw a new border. But based on the way Putin has behaved over the last 10 years, how do you, if you're Zelensky, knowing that Trump only has 3.5 years left in office, keep any kind of security apparatus or faith in this deal when Putin has shown that he will not abide by any sort of agreement not to invade again? Meaning, as soon as Trump leaves and you end up with another weak Democrat in office, Putin tries to take another bite at the apple. In other words, I'm actually sympathetic to Zelensky. The security guarantees seem to be, to me, the most important thing for Ukraine. I don't understand how you change that dynamic.
I'm not sure you can. Again, unless there is some disincentive to Putin that is not evident at the moment. To the contrary, I think that what he is signaling in his behavior to date, for sure, and arguably in some of his posturing at the moment, is he's leaving his options open. And that means that a security guarantee is necessary. I'm just not sure that the United States has the appetite for it. And if it does, whether it will be broadly, supported by the American people. We've talked ourselves into a position where a lot of folks, particularly in the MAGA community, are persuaded that Ukraine's not our problem, and we certainly don't want to put American boots or lives on the line to protect it. I, like you, I think, have some sympathy for the argument that the Ukrainians are making, especially because back in '94, we gave them security guarantees if they gave up nuclear weapons, and that went over the side, and they're rightfully, I think, very reluctant to buy that pig in a poke again.
What do you make of the argument that has been out there among some of the more hawkish Ukraine supporters in this country that if Putin isn't stopped definitively in Ukraine, he will go into other countries in Europe? Because that you're hearing less of that right now because I think everyone's focused on this current negotiation. But that has certainly been something that people have been saying about Russia's intentions.
I think that is Putin's intention. He's made no secret that he thinks the greatest disaster of the 20th century was the fall of the old Soviet Union. I think he seeks to, if not reestablish it fully, then some fashion of the Russian Empire, and that means bites of parts of Europe. Again, and I hate to belabor this point, but I think in some measure it's a function of whether he's going to have the backing and support of China to do such a thing. And unless we get serious about dissuading the Chinese from thinking that more chaos, what I call strategic arson, is something that they can pursue with impunity, you're going to find, I think, Putin believing that he can, in fact, similarly act with impunity, if not immediately, down the road.
Okay, so let's say we don't get any settlement at all. We're coming up on the winter. Typically, things kind of grind to a halt just based on the difficulties in moving men and materiel based on the weather there. How long would this go on, in your mind, if both sides just continue basically on the trajectory we're on right now?
Well, something that's changed in the course of this war is that it's not all about, the movement of mechanized divisions. That gets very tricky in the wintertime, especially the muddy periods at the beginning and end of it. But what I think you're going to be seeing more of is more attacks of rockets and drones, especially. The war can continue. That is a question of resources on the part of the Ukrainians, particularly human resources, and seemingly the Russians being bankrolled by the Chinese again, and getting all kinds of equipment for the war from Iran, if its mullahs are still in power there. I hope that will be something else that we attend to and bring to a close.
Frank, at DOD with Reagan, you were privy to high-level discussions of this nature. You know what the feel is like, what the tone is like when things are progressing versus when things are stalling. How would you gauge your optimism at what we've seen so far today, added to what we saw Friday in Alaska?
I think it's a work in progress. And my guess is that what we're going to see more of is posturing and a decision that there's more meetings to be had. So I think that this is not yet ripe for a conclusion. Hope I'm wrong, but I think there are pieces of this that haven't yet been addressed, as I say. And that means this will continue at the talking stage, I suppose, as well as the warring stage while the talking goes on.
Thank you, Frank. We appreciate the time and you coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Look, it's football season, and I know people maybe need a little bit of an uplift as there's been some dour things out there on the global stage. And one of the best things to just kind of kick back, have a beer, is football. And I know my son's football season kicks off on Thursday. That is high school football. But a lot of you out there gearing up too, whether it's the NFL, whether it's college football, and our friends at Prize Picks right now in 40-plus states, including California, including Texas, including Florida. We're going to make you, hopefully, have a lot more fun with football than you otherwise would. Every week we're going to give you picks. Once the season gets rolling, prizepicks.com, code CLAY. You put in $5 right now, you get $50 to just make football a little bit more fun than it already is. This is America's sport. All of you pretty much are going to be watching at some point in time. Go get hooked up now. 40-plus states, 13 million players. PrizePicks.com. My name, Clay. That's CLAY for $50 when you play $5. That's PrizePicks.com. My name, Clay.